when I draw directly in ink, as I did for this drawing, how do I maintain accuracy in the overall drawing when every mark I put on the paper will be there at the end? Let me show you what I think of as the positioning marks that I use and how I use them, which I've come to realize is key to drawing something directly in ink for me, for the way I think, for the way I draw, and for the sorts of drawings I want to have at the end. Occasionally, I've mentioned these in passing, or you may have seen me actually use them in videos. But they're easy to miss, particularly when the video is sped up. So I thought I would focus on exactly what these marks are and how I use them to highlight their key role in my drawing process. But this drawing is unnecessarily complex to show this. So we'll switch to a more straightforward subject, which I also used last week as a drawing subject. So let's go. Now, dots are an important positioning mark. They are easy to see when you draw in ink, but they don't take up visually much space on the paper. So they're easy to hide with the marks that we then add around them on top of them. And if a mark ends up being in the wrong place and ends up being in the middle of nowhere, such as in the sky, it will be small enough that with the rest of the drawing in place, that mark is not going to be too noticeable. I like to start somewhere in the center if there's no good reason not to. And so firstly, I'll do a dot for the spot where I want my first line to commence. Now, this now helps me just start to think about, visualize doing a line from there. But I'm actually going to start by going across this way from that line. And I also want to get a sense of how far down this line's going to come. So I do another dot. And now I'm going to do this line here. And now I'm going to bring another line down, trying to keep the proportion the same. And again, a positioning mark. And I'm thinking, does that look like that? And look, I think it does. Fortunately, there's a very slight side-on view we get there. Now, down here, we come down just a bit. So now I've established my starting point. Now, a lot of my positioning marks are actually on my reference, and you've seen me do a few of them already. Sometimes I will do an outline over a shape, as I have here, so I can visualize how it looks in ink outline rather than in the reference. Now I need to work out this distance here, the distance between the columns. And so I draw a line, and because I'm trying to draw it actual size, that's the size gap I want. So now I can visualize as a straight line that width. I find this lets me focus on this width without the distraction of the details that are behind, which can give the impression of spaces being wider or narrower. And now I put a line where I think that is. And I'm looking at this width, and again, I might do a line and this width. So that width and that width. What I'm likely to do at this point is to look at these details and do dots for those details. Now there's a little bit of a gap here, and then there's the width of that surround. And now I'm looking at the wooden door. And I'm also aware that the wooden door is divided in two, so I'm also looking at that and that. Is there room between the two of them for that? I think there is. And then this almost touches the pillar. So in fact, there's room for all of this detail between the two columns I've drawn. I want to keep it the same height as this one, so I'm going to come across from this one and do a mark, and the same down below. And this will just help me stop the line in the right place. And now I need to do a positioning mark for here. I want this to be the same as this. And now I have it. When things line up horizontally, I do a ghost line over the top, and then I do an actual line. Same down here, and the same down here. I do a line. I visualize a line there, and that looks okay. So now I want to do this arch. And what I'm going to do in my mind is I visualize a line across here, and this is the center point. And I try and work out this and this point. Now, the other thing I'm noticing is this arch starts there and aligns with there. So I'm going to put a little mark there and there, and also one on the other side. And now a mark this high. Some people might find it easier to imagine a box here and then visualize that box. But what I want to do is I'll put a line there because I know it's going to be hidden. I'll put a dot in the center because I know it's going to be hidden. And I want to indicate this point here. So it's here to here, here to, I'm going to say there. And now I can check that. No, I think it needs to be there. It needs to be that higher one. So now I have to draw this line, and I'm actually going to make it a little bit taller again. So firstly, I visualize, and sometimes I might put a couple of marks just to help me see where the curve is going to be. And now I've got to come down to the other side. Being right-handed, this is the side I have trouble doing. Again, trying to put some positioning marks and think, are they right? And it actually doesn't come up far enough. So I'm just going to add one there. Before I can do the top one, I need to see how far down it comes. So it comes down to here. I mean, from here to here is about the same as from there to there. And again, I mark where the top of it's going to be. Now on this side, I think I'm going to do a few positioning marks again. Now with the door, there is a line there that goes just above this little plinth thing. So I'll add that. And now I need to get this white line position. So I go straight across, and okay, it's going to be about that far down. So I do a bit of a line now. I don't take it right the way across because I don't want it right the way across. But this is also the point where this inner archway starts. So from here to here, I'll start by doing this line and this line, and then this line and this line. And it's the same thing with this arch. I put a dot where I think it's going to go. Now there is actually a little bit of the underneath here. I'm not going to worry about that because there's a fair bit of shading to do there. And that's going to cover that mark that's not quite right. And now I'm going to add the hatching for this. And now I'm going to work on the doors. So I'm going to draw these squares down the bottom. A door handle there. And I do the same thing on each side, moving out as I go. I visualize the windows. This is a new space I need to estimate. Sometimes I'll do something such as this to indicate the valued area because it can stop me becoming confused about what's what with the dots. And there's a little bit of width here that I need to allow for as well. So now I've got the spot where this column's going to go. But before I actually ink it in, I have a look to think, does it look right? Does that look right? In relation to that, from there to there, does here to there look right? And I think so. It maybe feels just a little bit too small. So I'll just still push it out a little bit further, but I also need now some marks top and bottom. Before I do the whole line, I put a mark to visualize. Now, this line would go here, but I need a double width for this. And again, the center is going to actually line up on this. So that is here. So that's about the center because of the angle. Now I can fill in the gaps. When I'm normally drawing, I would try and avoid these dots in a straight line right the way across because putting them in a straight line does draw attention to them. While they're not hugely prominent, creating recognizable patterns is not a good way to hide them. Now from here we have the side of the building, but we don't know how far up to take it. If I'm confident that this is in the right place, then this decorative line is just above it. And so now I do a mark as lightly as I can, as horizontally straight as I can. Now that to me looks like it's going upwards, so I'm going to do it again, just bringing it down slightly. And I want this line to come up and stop there. Minor corrections on the horizontal because there is some thickness to this. And now I look at this distance and I want it to finish in line with this. Again, the shadow provides a bit of scope to adjust any unevenness in our line. And I can see that this comes out past here. So it comes out about that much. And I look at this angle and I may run my pen over the reference to get a bit of muscle memory for what the angle is. Come across. I have this angle here. And to get this angle now, I need to position these. So I need more positioning marks here. So I'm looking straight down. What does this align with? And it aligns with the center. So that's good. So it's going to be above there. And again, I'm looking at what is this distance here. Now I know this line, and I'm looking at this line here, is going to come down to there. So it actually comes pretty much even with this point. And I can look at the angle that's going to be formed to see if it's correct. So here's the angle there. And according to this, it's not quite high enough. It needs to be a little bit higher. So let me see how that angle goes. and that looks more accurate. And I also simply look at it here and try and visualize this line. And then of course it does come down on the other side too. Now, above it. Now I'm looking at this distance though, not this one. That's a bit hard to tell. I want this to be the distance. I'll add a bit of hatching. And if I've been trying to draw the same size as my reference, I can measure to see how accurate has it been. So I can see that actually my width here has been pretty much spot on. If I look at my height, I can see that I made a proportion error in this first column, which didn't look so obvious at the time. But once I'd drawn this door in, I could see that it was proportionately taller than this door was. I mean, the height to width ratio had a higher height in relation to the width than my actual door did. So I knew that I'd gone too far down in this way. And checking is important because this is how we get a sense of how we need to work on our positioning marks plus our observation. So I'm more accurate on the widths than on the heights. This is the system I use even in more complex subjects. So whether I'm drawing a simple subject or a complex one, I use positioning marks and I start and progress in this way, and I find it's very helpful when doing a more considered drawing directly in ink. If I were doing a very quick sketch, I'd be taking more risks because the commitment in time and effort is not nearly as great, and what I might lose in accuracy, I'm hoping to make up for in the vitality of the lines and marks that I make. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. I hope you found this interesting. You may have noticed me doing these things before, but remember, positioning marks are not just something I use on my paper as I draw. They're things I use on my reference to help me see things more clearly without the distraction of some of the detail which can affect the way we perceive shapes and proportion. But in the end, however you draw these things and however they turn out, a little bit too long or not, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.